he was running the exact script that organised crime wanted him to run.
Yeah, there we go. Tony Burke, I've had my say on him. I think it's reprehensible what he's been doing today. But let's go to Alex Ryvchin, the Executive Council of Australian Jury, joining us from Sydney. First up, Alex, there's got to be some element of relief that this was not a planned mass casualty event, but rather an event designed, I suppose, indirectly to spark fear into the heart of so many people.
Well, look, on some perhaps superficial level, I think people are relieved that there wasn't an active plan to detonate a caravan full of explosives, which would have been a mass casualty event and transformed this country. So fortunately, that's not what was intended with this. But at the same time, the community's been grappling with an anti-Semitism crisis for 17 months now, dealing with more predictable political and ideological foes. And now to have this elaborate organised crime ring with some elusive kingpin that remains at large, perhaps in Australia, perhaps pulling the strings from abroad, paying operatives locally to carry out terrorist attacks domestically. I can't say that that revelation will calm people's anxiety at the moment, because I think it just adds another dose of uncertainty and complexity to what's already happening in our society.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. We've seen what's happened. We've seen the fire bombings. We've seen the graffiti. We've seen the arson attacks. And whoever was conducting these, and for whatever reason, it was also designed to strike fear and hatred into the Jewish community. So are you getting any further information from police or authorities? Because you must have a million questions for them.
We do. We have a lot of questions, and I think everything that's been revealed by the police, while we commend them for their work in getting us to this point, I think it's raised more questions than it's answered. We don't know which of the firebombing attacks, including the one on my former home, the incineration of a childcare centre, the attacks on vehicles, there's of course the Dust Israel fire in Melbourne, which of these are linked to organised crime, whether perpetrators remain at large, whether there's an ongoing threat to the community arising from these sorts of attacks. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. I think it's a good thing that people are in custody, but we're seeing again elements that are extremely concerning and troubling. We know we have political and ideological foes in this country, but now to see organised, hardened criminals perpetrating acts of violence for a whole other set of motives, it's deeply troubling.
Yeah, I think there are enormous concerns here, and I think some people have been too flippant about it, because you only have to look at organised crime in New South Wales, and it wasn't that long ago the organised crime squad was called the Middle East Crime Squad in the New South Wales Police Force. So there are obviously connections there, and we've seen a lot of links between Sydney-based organised criminals and the Middle East. So there could be a horrible overlap here between criminal intent of other kinds and anti-Semitism.
And I think there's elements of our society that have never wanted to admit that there's an anti-Semitism crisis, have never wanted to grapple with it. They found it to be an inconvenient truth. And I think the revelations by the police in their investigation has given them a pretext, perhaps an excuse, to brush aside anti-Semitism and pretend that what's transpired in our streets and in our cities for the past 17 months hasn't happened. But the crisis, let me assure you, is ongoing, and it's just become more complex and more challenging, and we need government and law enforcement to keep their eyes on the ball, because there's something terrible afoot in this country.
Yeah, and we need more information from the authorities as well. Thanks so much for joining us, Alex. I appreciate it. Alex Ryvchin there from the Executive Council of Australian Jury. We've got to take a break. I'll be catching up with the Nationals leader, David Littleproud, after this break. I'll ask him about Matt Keane, the former Liberal Treasurer, who's bagging the Liberals' nuclear policy.